All right, great. Welcome to episode 6 of Talent Acquisition Trends and Strategy. And today we are joined by Mukta Arya. Mukta, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, James. I'm happy to be here.
And before we jump into it, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're currently working on?
Yeah, sure. So currently I am the CHRO for Societe Generale. It's a corporate and investment bank in Asia Pacific. I'm based out of Hong Kong. My role is basically for the 12 countries that we are present in Asia Pacific across all the HR matters from recruitment to DE&I to well-being to benefits, compensation, etc. So I have a team of people working with me for the region.
Very cool. Very cool. And I know, so you just mentioned it as well. And something that we had talked on before jumping on the podcast is that you are very passionate about DE&I efforts. And I was hoping you could share with us how organizations, from your perspective, should be approaching DE&I and just philosophically from a strategic level, what they should be doing. And then maybe we could jump into some tactical steps on what leaders can do to implement better DE&I strategies.
For me, first of all, DEI for an organization should be something which is needed, and it's not something which is tick the box. I think that's very important. And organizations should realize that why it is important for them. And then what part of DEI is something that they should focus on, because every organization is different. And for example, for us, we decided in 2015 at the senior level in APAC, that means all the management committee members, we decided that for us in APAC, it's gender, it's culture, which is basically the nationality of the people that we have in the organization, differently abled as well as LGBT plus is something that we need to focus on. So then we decided to have, a diversity council with these 4 networks. We had employees who were who actually volunteered to become the chairpersons, and then we worked with the employee resource networks, and it grew slowly. For me, I think that this is the first important step is like you have to have the buy-in from the senior management. You have to identify what are the areas that you need to work on, and then involve employees. It is not easy in the beginning. It does take time. It does take a lot of patience, I would say, to really grow the networks and really make a difference. And it starts in stages, so you have the awareness stage, and then you actually embed these kind of the DE&I topics into your policies, and then it then goes forward and becomes a way of life. So we took a few years to come to this stage, but now I can say that after 7 years, I feel we are pretty much mature, but we still have a lot to do, and we keep on assessing. And I think every organization should assess whether, for example, the areas that they are looking at, are they enough, or with changing times they are changing. So, for example, we assess every year and see whether we should have multi-generational networks or something else which we should add on to. So, yeah, these are some of the steps I think which can help start the journey in DE&I and then continue it, because it has to be continuous, otherwise you will lose the momentum. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. It's constant iteration. It's never done. It's always a work in progress. There's always more to do. There's always better experiences that we can create, right? So I think we could just break that. You broke it into some really helpful sections. And the first thing you mentioned was how important it is to get executive buy-in. So for people, leaders within organizations, how do they go about getting executive buy-in from other leaders within the organization to really emphasize DE&I and make that part of like the core value set of the organization? How do you go about doing that?
The business case for DE&I, I don't think it's an issue nowadays, with any layer of management, and of course the executive management is they're smart people. So I really don't think anybody questions why we need DEI. What I think is important and to get the buy-in is to say, instead of just doing activities, like awareness sessions or whatever, what are the next steps? Are we really, for example, doing something which will make a difference to the organization, to the employees that are there? Employees should feel inclusive, and what we are doing, will it make that difference? So that's what the people leader have to do, is to really have that blueprint, and the game plan, which should say that, okay, this is what we are going to be doing, and this is the impact it will make on the organization as a whole. It doesn't have to be tangible sometimes, in the beginning. Of course, for example, gender and culture, you can see the numbers changing. However, in certain other fields, in LGBT plus, etc., sometimes it's not easy to measure it. But what we want is the environment to be more inclusive. And how can we make it more inclusive? Can we measure it through engagement surveys, etc.? I think the blueprint is quite important. And once that is there, the buy-in is not difficult. I can tell you, it's actually never difficult at the top management level. The difficulty is really implementing some concrete steps, which are maybe policy related or something which will really make a difference to the life of the employees. Yeah.
Right. And from the perspective of in the early stages forming the blueprint, I'm curious to get your thoughts at how tight of a collaboration is that with the employee group? I would, from my perspective and from what I'm doing at Secure Vision and some of the other conversations I've had, a lot of leaders I've discussed this with really hone in on the fact that, just doing surveys, right? It's not necessarily enough. You have to go out and talk to employees and really dive into this and figure out, ask for their feedback and figure out, okay, what high leverage opportunities or changes do you think we can make right now to create better, more inclusive experiences for everybody? I'm curious to get your thoughts. What does that process look like when you start doing that outreach to employees and getting your employee groups involved to help kind of create this blueprint? How does that work?
Yes. So first you need to have these employee champions, and who are passionate about the diversity topics, to become your chairperson for the employee resource group. I think that's the first step, where you need to have those people, because they have clout. They are the influencers, if I may say that, for the organization. So for me, I think identifying the right people is very important. We need to have a support from HR, the diversity person, if you have a separate one, or from HR, who can actually guide, these ERG networks into what is it that we are planning to do. A budget is necessary. The things that, some guidelines, what other companies are doing. So we do need that support group for the ERGs, the chairpersons and the committees, etc. So that we're not going all over the place, because, sometimes when we have a topic, we can just we can get into just doing awareness sessions, saying that, okay, if you have a panel discussion, this is good enough, etc. So for me, it's a combined effort with the chairpersons, the volunteers that are there, HR and the diversity teams that are there, and together work on the nitty-gritties, because it does require a lot of support in the beginning. And we need to really sort that out, that we are not getting embroiled in the admin part of it. What is more important is what we are trying to do. And once that is there, then of course, you can get the buy-in from the diversity and inclusion steerco, or whatever you call it in the organization.
So actually, I have a follow-up question on ERGs. I've been doing a lot of research on ERGs lately, and there's a lot of articles out there that talk about some of the challenges, or in some organizations, they're having a hard time extracting like value and actually implementing change from ERGs. And I'm just curious, like, what's the difference between the companies that are effectively executing ERGs and the ones that maybe are trying but aren't getting the results they want to see from it? Like, how do you set that up in a way that is actually going to drive change, organizational change?
For me, the difference is, as I said, it's the support from the organization for the ERGs. Okay. You do need to have some framework. You need to have the budget. You need to make sure that you have somebody, in the teams to help them to implement those. Because what might happen is you may have a lot of ideas, but if you don't have, and these are employee volunteers, who are doing this in addition to their jobs. So for that, you really need to provide support for them. So if you provide the support, I think it will happen. And you have to, I think, also make sure that there are deliverables at the end of the year, or whatever milestone that you have, quarterly or half yearly or yearly basis, and make sure that what you said at the beginning of the year, it is followed properly and it is done. I think that is important. So quarterly meetings of the diversity steerco, doing a check-in, checking with the ERGs, what is happening, do they need any support? It's quite important. And in our organizations, it's the HR team, that provide that support to the ERGs. And I think it also keeps things within that, I would say that it doesn't go haywire. We try to keep things on the track with that. And also, I think what is also most important thing is that once you keep a track, you can also publicize, which can create, more buzz for this particular topic, which is quite important. And then more employees can get interested and then participate in it. So it's a consolidated effort, which is through different teams and including communication team, in organizations, because communication is very important. If people don't know what is happening, they will not know what to do and how to join it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So it sounds like within the ERG, strong leadership needs to be there to keep things essentially kind of organized and to kind of collect everybody's thoughts, and to really then create actionable, tangible changes that can be implemented. And then going back to your first point of executive leadership buy-in, to actually provide the budget and the resources to actually help implement the changes, right? And then it just comes down to a motion of deliverables, check-ins, and just consistently iterating over a period of quarters and years.
Yes.
Okay, very cool.
It's an integrated kind of ecosystem, It is not activities which are in isolation. It has to all come together, and then it will be more effective. Yes.
Sure. And then so basically the next step then is like the deliverables, and that kind of goes into the blueprint, if you will, the feedback loop, and then baking it into policy. I'm assuming that's just that's really where HR comes in, and that goes into employee handbooks, goes into onboarding processes, really just any area within the company that is going to be impacted.
Many things actually. For me, it is, for example, when you have your promotion policy. So do you put some sort of a gender kind of not quotas, but basically percentages. For example, just as an example, that you have, say, 60-40 in terms of male-female ratio. Do you have the number of promoters which are of, similar ratio? When you are hiring people, are you making sure that your mix is, there's a balance of gender, there's a mix of culture, there is a mix of, other diversity angles that you have? You can build it into your system. It has to be done systematically. Yeah. So for example, when you have programs, do you see that you have a mix of different diversities? Succession planning, do you check on that? Yeah. Do you have, for example, when you have your medical benefits, do they take into account people of same sex, for example? Do we do things which are there for differently able? Is your office accessible for differently abled people? It's as simple as that. Are your toilets, for example, are accessible by people who have different diversities? So there are many different things. There are actually 1,000 different things. The language, are you using the language which is gender neutral? You see? So these are little things, but it has to be done. And it does take time in the beginning. But once it is done, then the awareness increases, and then it's like a nice virtuous cycle, But for me, yes, again, it's a consolidated effort. HR does come into play. It's a very important role, because if you don't embed it into policies, it's not tangible,
Sure. Yeah. And then it's like, how do you bake that into leadership training as well, right? Because if it's just like these policies that are kind of off in the corner somewhere, but it's not part of like the core day-to-day operations of the business, then it's not necessarily going to be followed either. And I think that's kind of a good segue into another topic that I know you're really passionate about, and actually so am I, in getting into learning and development and leadership development. I think I would love to get your thoughts on when it comes to learning and development. Maybe we could just start with like, why do so many companies get this wrong, and what are kind of the holes that they're falling into, and how do you set this up from a systematic perspective as well to make sure you have the right process in place to where learning and development is an ongoing part of the organization, and it's actually done in a way that's truly helpful and beneficial to leaders and employees?
Yeah, it's a very important topic, and what you said is also very true, that sometimes even though there are resources, companies can get it wrong. For me, the one of the biggest pitfall is of learning and development if it's not done properly, and why it is not done properly is that it is not linked to the business, So the alignment is very important. So whatever we do in learning and development, it's not in silo. It's not a program which is just here. It has to be addressing a need of the business. And in Asia Pacific, it is different from what the need is in Europe or in UK and US. So we do have to customize things which is according to the need. So I think that for me is very important. And frankly, it's not rocket science. Everybody knows that it should be addressing a business need. So that is one. The second is it should be consistent and continuous learning. If you're doing a program, then next year you forget about it because the training budget is cut, and then then somebody else joins the team and then they try something else. If you do something which is not consistent, and we do not have, for example, a continuous learning and development kind of pathway, then frankly it loses its impact. What I believe in, and what I have also seen in our organization, is that we built it over time. And in the beginning, of course, it was not something which was very popular, but it gained ground over a period of time because people did see consistency. People did see that okay, I mean, we are changing the content based on the economic environment and the business that is there, but we do have the basic principles which have been there for a longer time. And then slowly, people word of mouth, people talk about it, and then it becomes better. So for me, one of my advice to myself and to everybody else in HR profession is that perseverance is very important. So if you do not see the results in the first 2 years, don't get frustrated and think that, oh, nothing is happening, people are not joining this. It will happen when people see it on a consistent basis. I think it will happen, and the value is seen only after 2-3 years in leadership programs. So you have to be a little bit patient in this and then continue the good work. I think this is the most important thing. And also, of course, there are a lot of companies which cut the training budget when the going is not good. And I don't think that's not a good strategy at all. You can twist it a little bit, but I think investment in people definitely pays off, especially during bad times. So if you have people who are well trained, they will be more resilient when things are going bad. So some of the things that I believe in, and I think it works. At least in my experience, it works.
That's a really good point. So that's got me thinking a lot, actually, because right now at my own company, we're thinking about expanding the coaching program to give it more access to more of our employees. And I really want to. Right now we're trying to figure out like the cost and the budgeting of that. But I think particularly for new leaders stepping up into management roles, that coaching aspect is crucial. And I think you're right. I think intuitively, the way that most people think about it is that, okay, if the company's in a really good place, the economy is going really well, yeah, sure, like we're going to invest in more coaching and more learning and development resources. But then it's like, okay, if there's a correction, then maybe that's always one of the first things to go. But maybe that's when people actually need the support the most. And so maybe we're thinking, people are thinking about that the wrong way, and maybe learning and development and coaching, they shouldn't be seen as these expendable parts of the business, that they should be a core function because they're going to help people thrive, right? Which is good for the individual. It's good for the company. It's good for the customers. So I think that's a really interesting perspective that you just shared.
And it's an investment, and it should be continuous, so. Right. And it's various ways. If organizations are learning organizations, you don't have to spend a lot of this, because when you are training some people, they can in turn, train other people. It's a cascading effect.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I actually I have another kind of follow-up question on leadership training and coaching. Curious to get your thoughts on how do you have any advice on how to put together programs for first-time leaders, first-time managers?
Yes, we have done that in our organization also. So we have for every level of manager, first time, the mid managers, the senior managers, etc. What we experimented during COVID time, and maybe it could be a good thing, is to have really design thinking, really use of design thinking in creating the program. So you have people who are first-time managers, people who are managers, people who are the subordinates, of this. all involved in design thinking, and it can be done, online. It can be done remotely with a good facilitator and tools like Mural, etc. You can use that. And really, when you use design thinking, you are getting the views of of different parties, different perspective. The content that you create out of that is really, it's like, like to the point.
Yeah.
What you really want, because you are getting these different perspectives. And when people are involved in the designing of the program, you will see that the buy-in is very quick from the beginning. So we did that for our actually senior level programs, and I can tell you that it worked very well. For first level, for me, it's exactly the same process that you do. And of course, you also interview some people who are your successful first-time managers, and then see what kind of qualities that they have, what are the things that they faced when they became first-time manager. So it's a consolidated thing which you put together and then do it. We use external facilitators. We also have an internal trainer, but for some programs, we use external facilitators just because you can get different perspective. In the beginning, of course, it's a lot of effort. It may take a few months actually to define it, to make the final program. But I can tell you the result is worth it. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. I agree with you. It's got to be a priority. And I think I wanted to also talk to you about something that I think is a hot topic right now, getting into the future of work. And to me, this is about, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on what that means to you. To me, what it means is, how do we create compelling employment opportunities for top talent so that we can attract and retain the best fit individuals for our organizations, right? Is that your perspective on future of work, or what? How do you view the topic future of work?
So maybe just as a background, as you know, banking is a regulated industry here. So we do have sales, trading, and we have regulated staff in most of the countries. So when we look at future of work, sometimes we have to be a little bit more careful, compared to some of the other industries which are not regulated. Yeah. For me, future of work means more flexibility, which as you know, the pandemic has actually accelerated that, and which is quite good for us. Luckily, our infrastructure is quite good in SocGen, so basically people could work from home. Like, for example, my entire team in HR can work from home. We don't have to go to office, and we can really run the business like this. And so do most of the other departments. That, I think, is an important step towards future of work, which is flexibility. The other thing for me is really, can people do different roles, at the same time? Now, that is something, is my view. We don't do it in SocGen right now, but I think that in future people will be able to do multiple jobs, while being part-time here or part-time there, or maybe 2 days in one organization, 2 days another, and then maybe 2 days or 3 days what their passion is like. So for example, I can be a HR professional, then I can maybe work in a restaurant because I like cakes, and then the third is I'm maybe doing coding and doing something else. So I do think that this is something which is happening in some industries, and I do think that it might become something which is more popular later on. I also think in terms of future of work that people now, because they can work from anywhere, people have seen that they can work from anywhere. So really, we will have to change the way we think about contracts, the way the deliverables are produced, the way taxes are, etc. I do think that this is something which is going to be impacted in future. Maybe not right now, because right now we see a different kind of story where all these questions come up. But I think it is definitely going to happen. And I also feel that in future, the future of work is also coexisting, as we know, with AI and really using predictive, for example, people analytics, much more than what we are doing right now, and really taking some concrete decisions which are there. I feel that it's coexistence of human and technology, and I do not think that technology can take over completely. I still feel that it is going to be coexistence, and it's going to be a mutually beneficial coexistence, and not in some movies that we see where, the robots are destroying the world. At
Right.
least I don't think so.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think yeah, there's so many shifts that are occurring right now in the workplace. And I think, so what we're seeing right now is just huge emphasis on flexibility, huge emphasis on integration of personal and professional life. People are adding a lot more significance to the question, how is this position going to help me get the most out of life, or what types of experiences will this opportunity create for me, and will I have the flexibility to do the other things that are outside of work?
Yes.
I mean, we're seeing that a lot more, and not to say that they're directly asking this question like in an interview, but what I mean is they're in their decision-making process, when you kind of hear how they're thinking through whether or not to move forward with an opportunity. It's a lot more focused around like, look, if the comp is like somewhat similar, like, of course, yes, like people want to make a lot of money, they want to have good benefits, of course, right? But they're focusing a lot more on, is this position going to really integrate well with my personal life and my other goals outside of the organization?
Yes, very much, very much. I mean, even I think sometimes, and I'm not in the new generation, I'm Generation X, but I have also started thinking about it, so yeah, it's happening.
Yeah, it's happening. And I think too, it's like I don't know, maybe this isn't obvious, maybe this really isn't too much of an insight, but I think that the companies that are going to thrive are going to be the ones that just buy in completely to the concepts of flexibility, to the concepts that maybe more people want to be contractors. They want multiple roles. They want more flexibility. They want to work from home. These types of topics, there's no reason to fight it. And I think some companies are falling into the trap of just kind of saying like, oh, well, right now is a candidate driven market, and COVID's not going to be forever, and it's a candidate driven market right now. Those never last. It's going to flip back. We don't really need to embody and embrace kind of this macro shift that's happening in the marketplace, and with people's preferences and needs. And I think that those companies that, a lot of them have been saying it for the past like year, and they're just falling behind. The best, the top talent is always going to have the most options, right? They're always going to have in any market condition. And that's the thing. It's like, look,
that's
even
true.
when it shifts back, it's like, the top talent are going to help you continue to grow and evolve as an organization. They're always going to have the most options. So I think a lot of organizations are somewhat short-sighted when it comes to kind of embracing change. Like, they're trying to fight it and say like, no, this is the way it needs to be. But it's really like, look, we are here. Like, we have, like, I feel like a company essentially has two jobs, right? You have to create incredible experiences and outcomes for your employees, and incredible experiences and outcomes for your clients. And you can't neglect either of those things. And I think when companies like, when they're building employment packages and when they're thinking about process, they need to be looking at it from perspective of like, what is going to create an incredible experience and opportunity for our employees. And at the end of the day, it's about what the employees want. It's not really about what executive leadership wants. It's about how do we empower our people to get the most out of this opportunity and be happy and want to work here and want to stay here.
Yes, exactly. And you're right. It is the employees' world today. Yeah. And we cannot ignore what they want. Yeah. And frankly, people are also becoming much more vocal because they are not scared of losing the job. Maybe in some cases, but majority of the cases, I think people are not scared of that. And what you said about the great reshuffle or the great, rethinking of priorities, etc., has taken precedence. And frankly, I think I like it that our employees are vocal, and they're talking about what they want. Because it also makes us think that, okay, we have been doing this for a long time. It's time to change, and look at things from this side and that angle or some other angle which is there. I think it's also very exciting times we are at, where things what we like. For example, I completed my MBA in 1997. So what I studied at that time in HR has completely changed. There's still some basics, of course, which will not go away, but majority of the things have completely changed. And it's very exciting, frankly, to actually rewrite history, not rewrite, actually. No, create new history,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
I totally understand what you're saying. And you know, as one of our final topics, I really do want to dive into people analytics with you, technology. You know, I think, and pretty much every topic we've talked about today, you have started to touch on the idea of analytics, data, and obviously that should be a driving force within every organization to do things. Well, I think doing things the right way, or doing it with data and really understanding the data.
Yes,
So
yes.
when people analytics, like what are the top from an analytics data perspective as a CHRO, what are the top like kind of metrics or analytics or what data sets that you're tracking, and how do you kind of leverage data to drive decision making within your organization?
We actually started, actually having a dedicated resource for people and analytics few years ago. And our first step was, really the static data that we have. How do we have that data for recruitment, for attrition, for diversity, so gender and nationality? As I said, this is what we track. We are tracking on, when we are hiring people, what is the cycle time from open position to this? How many people that we convert from trainees into permanent? Whether we are sourcing through direct channels, through internal referrals, through headhunters, etc. So we do actually now capture a lot of these things, on our training and development, the kind of programs that people are attending, the usage of our learning platforms, how many of them are mandatory, non-mandatory. Then, on talent, whether we have diversity in talent, do we have enough successors, etc., those kind of things. So we do have a lot of data, which we are now analyzing. And I think we are more comfortable with the data that we already have, and we can have this static data. What we are going forward to is on predictive analytics, and this is what we want to do. We have not done it yet, but this is something which we really want to work on, where the predictive analytics can help us to take decisions in a informed manner. So I'm not saying that they will be 100%, right, and we will take decision based only on that, but it will really help us in taking informed decisions. And this is where we need to go further. But right now, I know that a lot of organizations struggle with the data quality, and then sometimes, I mean, that's a very important point. And I can tell you, even now, a lot of organizations do not have that. So it has to be set right, and then you get into predictive,
Right. I think you need a dedicated person or a dedicated team to oversee data integrity to actually, because if you leave it up to function leaders and managers that are already busy creating opportunities, solving problems, it's just ultimately like it's things are going to be recorded in inaccurate ways or not recorded at all, and it's so you really, I think it's like anything else, right? It's like you need the executive buy-in, you need the budget to actually invest, right? And I was curious to dive a little bit into DE&I metrics. What technology are you using to track, and could you talk about like some really kind of clear tactical steps of like, okay, let's say you want to set this up for DE&I. Yes. What tech are you using? What metrics do you start with? What kind of parameters, or how do you go about putting in place parameters of like, this is our goal? Like, how do you do that goal setting motion?
So the data that we get is from our HRIS system. So we do have a HRIS system from APAC, I think, which frankly is the 101 bedrock. Every organization need to have that. And if you're a small organization, of course, people still use Excel sheets, which for me is not the best way. However, I think first you need to have the data on, for example, on gender and nationality. So I'm taking the example of that. So on gender, of course, we are looking at, in different departments, in different corporate levels. So we have 5 levels, from analyst, associate, VP, director, managing director, and we track at each level, gender and international profiles that we have. We look at over the years whether we have made progress, and then we do have targets, frankly, because at senior, when we go to the senior management, it drops drastically, like in all investment banking. So for us, we do that department-wise, country-wise, corporate level-wise, and then we try to see where the issues are. Okay, where do we have less women or less males? Because in some countries you have more females than males. So we are looking at gender balance. Where it is. So this simple matrix where you have the simple data, it can really say a number of things. You really have to identify where the issue is. If there's an imbalance, why is it there? So you have to see, because in different markets, in Japan, Korea, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, the reasons can be very different, for these things. So then you have to see that, is it a systemic problem where you do not have the talent pool, for example, in the market, or is it a problem which is our company's issue, So we have to then look at that. We have to see whether it's a managerial problem, whether it is something which can be fixed or not fixed, etc. Are more women leaving, So even in attrition data, we check whether it's more women leaving or it's the males leaving. So succession planning, do we have enough, balance? For example, when we are promoting people, are we making sure that the balance is there or not? So again, for me, we measure it at each and every stage, from attraction, when we are actually going to campuses, when we are getting the CVs, when we are hiring people, when we are promoting people, when we are putting them in succession plan. Every single step you have to measure and see where the issue is. The other major thing which is there is the gender pay gap, and this is something which is quite important, which organizations have to really look at. And we do it at the time of our compensation review, where we look at the gender pay gap. We need to see whether we need to do something about it, whether it is justifiable, whether it's not justifiable, equal pay for equal jobs, etc. It's quite important. And for me, this is a process which is continuous. You cannot do it one time and stop it. You have to monitor it on a regular basis. And it throws up very interesting facts, when you look at the data, even the static data, even without predictive analytics, you can actually have a whole narrative and a whole story, which you can really work on, find the issues and really work on. So yeah, it's a continuous journey.
Yeah, this was a really super valuable. So thank you for sharing some more detail there. Thank you so much. And I also wanted to talk to you about talent acquisition metrics. Just down the pipe, hiring, funnel metrics for talent acquisition. What are the top metrics that you're tracking within your organization? What goals do you have in place tied to talent acquisition outcomes?
For us, what we want is our talent acquisition is also to, serve the agenda of not only, of course, getting the best, but also the diversity part also. So what we look at from the beginning is when we are, sourcing, when we are giving the CV shortlisting, there's a balance in terms of diversity, international profiles. In the interview panel, do we have, again, balance in terms of gender as well as international profiles, so that we can have different perspectives. So we measure it, we document it. So in our employment approval, mailer, we do have all these things documented. That, for example, how many CVs did we have a balance on gender, international profiles? In the interview panel, did we have the balance, etc. So we monitor it because I think it's quite important for us.
And where do you, and sorry, I think you mentioned this, but just where do you say you tracked that? Is that within your applicant tracking system, or how do you track that data?
Whether this is our internal when we take approval for a hiring. Okay,
so is this part of the HRIS system, basically?
We do it in our mailers right now. Yeah. Okay. We do not have in our tracking system, applicant tracking system. We do not have right now, but we will look at it in future. But at least for the time being, we still want to monitor that. And at the end of it, we want to look at whether we are really following the policies that we have put in place. So for me, that is quite important. Then, of course, we track the sourcing, which is from, is it direct sourcing? Is it internal referrals? Is it headhunters, etc.? the cycle time from the time we post the job to we give the verbal offer, because I think the other things are there, and we are looking at reducing it. For example, we look at how much conversions that we have done from other like contractors and trainees and what we call VIEs, the European trainees that we have. Do we actually convert them to permanent positions? So we look at that. Then we look at the offers, how many, the acceptance rate, the decline rate that is there. Yeah, and then the diversity finally, on that. Yeah, I think this is what we track right now. We also look at rehires. How many people are rehires? Because for us, it's a question of we are attractive enough for our ex-employees to come back. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that metric. For offer acceptance rate, does your team primarily look at it just holistically, or do you look at it on like a national level, or do you look at it on a function department level? Like how do you go about all of the above? Like you segmented a bunch of different ways.
So APAC, we will have, of course, anyway, we will have differentiation. If you want to see for a particular department, for a particular country, we can look at it. And for me, it's quite important, because if you have that detail, then you can figure out if we have an issue in a particular area or not. Yeah.
What offer acceptance rate do you target?
I mean, we would love 100%,
yeah, that's my target too.
We would love 100%, but some countries like Hong Kong last year was really hot for IT talent. So it was not easy we had some declines which were there. So which was actually after a long time. So it was not a very nice feeling, but it happens in the candidate market here.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, that is super helpful. We covered a ton of ground, and I know we're coming up on time here. I would love to just share with everybody, or if you had a moment to share, how can people find you if they want to follow you online, or follow possibly some of the content that you're producing, or connect with you? Is there a way that they can engage with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Mukta Arya, with my own name, Societe Generale. So yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me, whatever you want to do. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Mukta, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a phenomenal conversation, just so much value for the listeners. So thank you for joining us. And if you're open to it, I would love to do this again with you, hopefully in the next 3 to 6 months, sometime soon.
Sure, I enjoyed it very much too. So it will be my pleasure, James. Thank you.
All right, great. And for everybody tuning in, thanks so much. And we'll talk to you next time. Take care.